My left arm throbbed inside the cast, every movement a reminder of Claire's cruelty. 3 days earlier, my daughter-in-law had fractured it when I refused to sign away the fortune I had won. I sat in my worn armchair, staring at the door, praying the silence would last. But then I heard Daniel's voice, loud, impatient, followed by Claire's sharp heels striking against my entryway tiles. "Eleanor, open up!" Daniel banged against the door like a man possessed. I hesitated, my heart racing. The first time they came, Claire had hurt me. What would happen this time? "Open the damn door," Claire barked. "We're not leaving until you sign those papers." Her voice, once sweet when she first entered my life, was now nothing but venom. I pressed my good hand against my chest and tried to breathe. I wanted to keep the door locked forever, but fear and habit made me turn the knob. Daniel pushed past me without looking at my arm. Claire followed, her eyes glowing with greedy triumph. They sat on my furniture as if it were theirs. "Mom," Daniel began, his tone cold, "we need to settle this today. Claire's 5 months pregnant. We need that money for the house, for the business, for our child's future." He said it as though it were an order, not a request. I forced myself to stand tall, even with my broken body. "Daniel, I already told you. I'll help you, but I won't give up all 4 million. I've earned the right to live with dignity." Claire's face twisted with fury. She jumped up. "Dignity? You've already lived your life, Eleanor. You're almost 70. That money doesn't belong to you, it belongs to us. What will you spend it on?" "Medicine?" She stood inches from me, her pregnant belly like a weapon between us. "I don't want half. I want all of it. My son will grow up in a mansion, not some old shack you cling to." Her spit hit my face as she screamed. She shoved me, and I collapsed back into the chair. Pain seared through my fractured arm, forcing a scream from my throat. "Megan, enough!" I cried, but Daniel didn't move. He just stared, stone cold, as if I were nothing but an obstacle. "Daniel, please," I begged. "You're my son." Control her, but his face was harder than hers. "No, Mom. Claire's right. You don't understand what this means for us. I sacrificed everything for you. Now it's your turn to give back." His words sliced deeper than Claire's blows. My own son, my only child, siding with her against me. I thought back to the years after my husband's accident, when Daniel was just 8. I had nothing but debts, yet I worked double shifts to keep him fed. I sold my car, pawned my mother's jewelry, even gave up a marriage proposal because he begged me not to remarry. Every sacrifice had been for him. "Daniel," I whispered, tears streaking my face, "I never asked you to sacrifice. I gave everything so you could have a good life. Don't do this to me." "Stop the drama," Claire snarled, striking me across the cheek with her hand. "If you don't sign tomorrow, I'll break your other arm." Her grip closed on my neck and twisted my injured arm until I thought I'd faint. She released me, and I crumpled to the floor. "You have until 10 a.m., Daniel said coldly. "Come with us to the bank, transfer everything, and smile while you do it. Or your life will be hell." They stormed out, slamming the door behind them. I lay on the floor sobbing, my body burning from pain, but nothing compared to the wound in my heart. My son had betrayed me. He had chosen money over blood. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories tormented me. Daniel as a boy, begging for a bicycle I couldn't afford, crying because Santa had brought him only a second-hand toy. I remembered selling my engagement ring to buy that bicycle. The joy on his little face when he thought Santa had remembered him. That joy had once meant the world to me. Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into this cruel stranger? I thought of Mr. Morris, the kind widower who once offered me a second chance at love. Daniel had threatened to leave me if I remarried. I gave him my whole life, and in return, he gave me contempt. I rose from my bed at dawn, my arms screaming with every movement. But inside me burned something stronger than pain, determination. I would not surrender my dignity. I would not let them destroy me. I went to the kitchen and brewed tea, my mind racing. From my purse, I pulled the ticket, the one that had turned my life upside down. My late husband's birthday, our wedding day, Daniel's birthday, the numbers that gave me $4 million. At first, I had thought it was a blessing for all of us. Now I saw it clearly. It was my lifeline and my test. Claire and Daniel thought I was a weak old woman. But they were wrong. I had survived widowhood, poverty, years of hard labor. I had raised a son alone, and now, if I had to, I would fight them alone too. That afternoon, I opened a worn notebook and began to write everything down: the threats, the insults, the violence, dates, times, words. I recorded it all. If they wanted a war, I would have my evidence ready. Still, the weight of loneliness crushed me. I had no siblings, no close relatives, no one who would believe me over Daniel's lies. But then I thought of Linda, my new neighbor. A kind woman with whom I'd shared coffee and laughter these past months. I picked up the phone. "Linda, I'm sorry to bother you late," I whispered, "but I need your help." 10 minutes later, she was in my living room, her face pale when she saw my arm in the cast and the bruises around my neck. "Eleanor, what happened?" "Claire," I said bluntly. "She did this because I refused to give them the money." Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You have to call the police. They'll never believe me," I said. "Daniel will say I fell." "But I have another plan." I explained everything: the threats, the bank meeting, the evidence I was gathering. Linda listened with wide eyes, then nodded firmly. "Then I'll help you. We'll take photos of your injuries tonight. If anything happens, the truth will be clear." For the first time in days, I felt hope. Not because my son loved me, he didn't, but because I realized I wasn't as helpless as they thought. As Linda snapped the pictures, I clenched my good hand into a fist. "They want to break me," I murmured, "but tomorrow they'll see. I'm not the weak old woman they imagine. I'm Eleanor. And I will fight." Morning arrived, heavy with dread but sharpened by purpose. I dressed carefully, choosing a black dress that made me look dignified, not weak. Concealer hid the worst of the bruises. By 8:30, Linda was at my side, just as we had agreed. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, studying my face. I nodded. "More ready than they'll ever imagine." At 9 o'clock sharp, Daniel and Claire arrived. They looked like they were headed to a gala. Daniel in a suit, Claire in an expensive maternity dress, her lips painted scarlet. Their smugness made bile rise in my throat. "Good morning, Mom," Daniel said cheerfully, as though he hadn't threatened me the night before. "You look nice. Ready to go to the bank?" Claire clasped my hand with false sweetness. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so glad you came to your senses. Today is going to be perfect." I forced myself to smile. "Yes, children, I finally understand. It's better if you handle everything." Their eyes glittered with triumph as we drove away. Claire babbled about the mansion they buy, the car, the nursery. Daniel hummed a tune, relaxed, believing victory was at hand. I sat silently in the back seat, memorizing every word. At the bank, Daniel opened his leather briefcase and laid out papers marked with yellow tabs. "You just have to sign here, Mom. Easy." I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "May I read them first?" "Oh, Mom, they're just formalities," Claire said, her voice tight with impatience. "Theo." She caught herself, correcting. Daniel already reviewed them. "Just sign. I'd still like to read," I insisted, drawing out the minutes until the clock struck 10:30. Then, in my sweetest old lady voice, I asked the bank executive, "Sir, could I speak with you privately before signing? I just want to make sure I'm doing everything correctly." Daniel's jaw tensed. "Mom, there's no need. It'll only take a moment," I interrupted, letting the banker escort me to a private office. Once the door closed, I dropped the act. "Sir, I need your help. My son and his wife are threatening me. She fractured my arm because I refused to give them my money." I showed him the cast, the bruises, and the photos Linda had taken. His face went pale. "Mrs. Bees. Ellis, this is very serious. Shall I call the police?" "Not yet," I said firmly. "But I need to protect my money immediately." For 20 minutes, we worked in silence. I transferred $3.5 million into a brand new account under my sole control, protected with every security measure the bank offered. $500,000. I left behind in the original account to keep up appearances. I also registered instructions. Any attempt by Daniel or Claire to access my funds would trigger an automatic police alert. When I returned to the waiting area, Daniel and Claire were perched on the edge of their seats, their smiles brittle. "All good, Mom?" Daniel asked, his voice strained. "Yes," I said innocently. "I just needed to understand the process." Back at the desk, the executive pulled up my account balance at my request. "Mrs. Ellis currently has $500,000, he said. The silence that followed was electric. "What do you mean 500,000? Claire screeched. "It's supposed to be 4 million. Daniel's face turned crimson. "Mom, what did you do?" I blinked at them. "That's what the gentleman says. Maybe the hackers I hear about on the news took the rest? You lying hag." Claire's shrill voice drew stares from every customer. She lurched to her feet, pointing at me like a witch hunter. She moved it. "She's deceiving us." Bank security appeared. "Ma'am, you need to calm down." Daniel grabbed my good arm, squeezing until I winced. "Tell me where the money is," he growled. "You're hurting me," I whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. The guard stepped forward. "Sir, let go of her now." Daniel released me, his hands shaking with fury. "Fine, but this isn't over." They stormed out, cursing under their breath. Through the bank's glass doors, I watched them in the parking lot, shouting at each other, gesturing wildly. They looked like cornered animals, and I savored the sight. In the taxi home, I allowed myself my first real smile. They thought they had beaten me. Instead, I had stripped them bare in public and secured my money. Step 1 was complete. I didn't have long to wait for retaliation. At 1 o'clock, Daniel's car screeched into my driveway. He used the spare key he'd begged for years earlier, barging in without knocking. "Mom," his voice boomed through the house. "Come out right now." I sat calmly in my armchair, tea steaming on the table. Claire stormed in behind him, her fury boiling over. "Where's our money?" she shouted. I sipped slowly. "What money, dear?" "The account has 500,000. "That's what the man at the bank said." Daniel paced like a caged lion. "Don't play dumb." "You moved it." "I wouldn't know how to do such things," I said sweetly. "Maybe the bank made an error." Claire's face twisted. She leaned so close I smelled her perfume laced with sweat. "You lying witch." She spat the words, then began tearing through my drawers, rifling papers, tossing my belongings onto the floor. "Stop," I shouted. "Those are my things." Daniel joined her, opening my desk, scattering letters. Then he found my notebook, the one where I had written every detail of their abuse. He read aloud with mockery. Daniel said it was my obligation to give him everything. Claire threatened to break my other arm. "Huh!" Claire snatched it from him, skimmed a few lines, then tore the pages into shreds. "Crazy old bat," she hissed. "You think this will protect you?" I watched silently, knowing I had copies safe at Linda's house. Finally, Daniel tossed the scraps into the trash. "We'll be back every day until you tell us the truth. You can't hide it forever." At the door, Claire turned with a wicked smile. "Oh, and Eleanor, we've already told everyone you won 4 million but refused to share. By tonight, the whole family and the neighbors will know you're a selfish miser. Let's see who still respects you then." They left, slamming the door. My house was in shambles, but my resolve was solid. They thought humiliation would break me, but I had already lost their love. What more could they take? That night, I checked Facebook for the first time in months. Claire had posted a picture of me with the caption, "My mother-in-law won 4 million and refuses to help her family." She'd rather waste it on herself than see her grandchild grow up with opportunities. Sad how money changes people. The comments were vicious. Distant relatives called me selfish. Neighbors I barely knew judged me. Claire had painted herself the victim and I the villain. I closed the app with steady hands. Let them talk. Soon, the truth would shout louder than their lies. The next morning, I walked into Attorney Benjamin Carter's office with a folder stuffed with evidence. He listened carefully as I explained everything: the broken arm, the threats, the harassment, the smear campaign. His eyes darkened as he examined the photos Linda had taken. Mrs. Brain. Ellis, this is aggravated assault and extortion. You have more than enough grounds to press charges. I don't want them in prison, I said quietly. I just want my peace. But I do want protection. He nodded. We can file a restraining order immediately, and I strongly suggest a new will. Remove them entirely. If they're after your inheritance, cut them off now. By the end of that meeting, I had signed the papers. Daniel and Claire were legally barred from coming near me. And my estate, every penny of it, was redirected to charities for elderly victims of abuse. My so-called family would get nothing. For the first time since winning the lottery, I felt like I had seized control of my own life. My money was safe. My future was mine. And Daniel and Claire had no idea the war they thought they were winning had already turned against them. The restraining order was barely a day old when the phone began ringing nonstop. Daniel's voice filled my voicemail, pleading, threatening, bargaining. Mom, answer me. We can fix this without lawyers. Mom, this is betrayal. Cancel that order or you'll regret it. Each message was another nail in the coffin of his credibility. I saved them all, but Claire was not content with phone calls. She doubled down on her smear campaign. Online, she painted me as a senile old woman, paranoid and cruel. She posted videos of herself sobbing, stroking her belly. I just don't understand why a grandmother would choose money over her own grandchild, she cried to the camera. We're only asking for help, but she treats us like enemies. The video spread through our community like wildfire. Strangers wrote me hateful messages. Some neighbors stopped waving when I passed. For a moment, I felt the sting of isolation. But then, I remembered, lies only survive until the truth steps into the light. And the truth was ready. Attorney Carter called one morning. Mrs. Ellis, they filed a civil lawsuit, defamation, slander, and a petition to have you declared mentally incompetent. My stomach lurched. If a judge sided with them, Daniel would control my money, my house, my freedom. I would be his legal prisoner. But Carter's voice was calm. Don't worry. We'll counter with evidence, medical evaluations, your photographs, the recordings, the witnesses. You are in command of your faculties, and we will prove it. Still, I couldn't shake the thought, what if the lies worked? What if the court believed them? That night, I lay awake, listening to the clock tick, knowing my fate could rest on a stranger's judgment. I decided then that silence was no longer my ally. If Claire could spread her lies in public, so could I tell the truth. I called the local newspaper. I have a story, I told the reporter. A story of a woman who won the lottery and was nearly destroyed by her own family. 2 days later, my face was on the front page. 4 million and her family turns against her. The article featured photographs of my fractured arm, Claire's online posts, and my testimony of threats and violence. The effect was immediate. My phone rang off the hook, not with insults but with apologies, support, and offers of help. Neighbors who had judged me now brought casseroles. Elderly rights organizations reached out with legal aid. And a national television program invited me to share my story with the country. When the episode aired, thousands saw the truth. Letters poured in from seniors who had suffered similar betrayals. Many told me my courage had given them the strength to stand up for themselves. For the first time in years, I felt proud, not because of the money, but because my pain had meaning. Daniel and Claire's reaction was explosive. That very night, they violated the restraining order, pounding on my door like maniacs. You ruined us, Daniel shouted, his face red with rage. Now everyone thinks we're monsters. You old hag, Claire screamed from the yard, her voice shrill enough to wake the block. You've destroyed our lives. No one will hire us. You'll pay for this. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones raised to record the spectacle. I dialed the police with calm fingers. Officers, my son and daughter-in-law are violating a restraining order. They're on my property, threatening me. Within minutes, patrol cars arrived. Daniel and Claire were handcuffed on my lawn as the neighbors watched. "This isn't over, Mom," Daniel roared as they shoved him into the back of the squad car. "You'll end up penniless and alone." But his words only echoed into the night like the hollow threats they were. The following morning, their lawyer withdrew the civil lawsuit. With their arrest broadcast on the evening news, they had no credibility left. Their reputations shattered, they were fired from their jobs, abandoned by friends, and shunned by family. 3 months later, the neighborhood gossip was unanimous. Daniel and Claire had moved across town to live with her mother. Their faces, once smug with entitlement, were now associated with shame. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life. I remodeled my home, painting the walls with warm colors, replacing furniture they had once sat on, filling the garden with flowers. It was a cleansing, a reclaiming of the space they had tainted. With $500,000 left in my original account, I invested wisely. I bought a small rental property for a young family, ensuring steady income. I donated a portion to a fund supporting abused seniors. And for the first time in decades, I spent money purely for myself, on comfort, on peace, on dignity. 6 months later, I crossed paths with Claire at a supermarket. She looked thinner, weary, her pregnancy far along. She lowered her head when she saw me. "Mrs. Ellis," she whispered, her voice trembling. I wanted to apologize. I have no excuse for what I did. I was desperate. I studied her for a long moment. She seemed sincere, yet the memory of my broken arm pulsed beneath my skin. "An apology doesn't erase pain," I said softly. "But I hope, for your child's sake, you learn what real love is." Her eyes filled with tears as I walked away. For the first time, I felt nothing. Not hatred, not pity, just release. A year after the lottery, I moved to a smaller house in a quiet neighborhood. Linda relocated nearby, and we became like sisters, sharing meals and laughter. For the first time in years, I built the family I chose, not the one forced on me by blood. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mrs. Ellis," a social worker said, "Claire has given birth to a baby girl. Both parents have been arrested on drug charges. The child is in state custody. Would you consider taking her?" The question stole my breath. My granddaughter, innocent, blameless, was caught in the wreckage of her parents' choices. That night, I walked the floor, torn between scars of betrayal and the pull of blood. But when dawn came, the decision was clear. "I'll take her," I told the social worker, "but under my conditions. Full custody. No rights for Daniel or Claire unless they truly change." 3 weeks later, the baby was placed in my arms. She had Daniel's eyes, but none of his hardness. I named her Grace. From the moment I held her, I felt life surge back into me. Grace needed no money, no inheritance, only love. And that I had in abundance. I turned a spare room into a nursery. I hired a nanny to help with the long nights, but the most precious hours were mine alone, rocking her to sleep, singing lullabies, watching her tiny chest rise and fall in peace. Grace gave me back what Daniel and Claire had stolen: purpose, joy, family. One day, Attorney Carter called. "Daniel wants you to visit him in prison. He says he wants to apologize." I looked down at Grace sleeping in my lap and shook my head. "Tell him that if he truly changes, if he learns what love means, then maybe one day he can meet his daughter, but not before. I won't raise her to think betrayal is love." That night, I sat in my garden, Grace cradled in my arms, the scent of roses filling the air. I thought of everything: the broken bones, the lies, the betrayals. The $4 million had cost me a son, but given me something far greater: freedom, dignity, and the chance to break the cycle of greed with a new generation. I kissed Grace's forehead, whispering, "Money doesn't define us, my sweet girl. Love does, and you'll always have mine." For the first time in years, I was not afraid of the future. My war was over, and in its place was hope, tiny, precious, and sleeping peacefully in my arms.